Welcome to the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel in downtown Hartford for this final debate of the U.S. Senate campaign in Connecticut between Democratic Congressman Chris Murphy and Republican Linda McMahon. Now, this debate is sponsored by the Connecticut Broadcasters Association. I'm Steve Kochko of the Connecticut Radio Network and CPTV. The reporters for this event include Al Terzi of Fox Connecticut, Dennis House of WFSB, Keisha Grant, NBC Connecticut, and Mark Davis from News 8. The rules for this debate are as follows. Each reporter will ask a question of our candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. There will then be an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal for both candidates. Our reporters will ask questions in sequence. I will intercede if necessary for clarification or to remind about time limits. And I will ask questions if needed to round out the hour. At that point, the format may be altered to allow each candidate equal but reduced time to answer in the remaining time available. Each candidate also will have an opportunity for a closing statement. I will remind everyone in our audience to hold off on applause until the end of the debate to ensure that our candidates have time to address the issues. Now, as a result of a coin toss earlier, the first question is going to go to Linda McMahon, and that first question comes from Al Terzi.
Thank you very much, Steve. Mrs. McMahon, good afternoon. When you were asked last week at UConn how you would protect Social Security while keeping program costs under control, you gave no specifics. You merely said you and your colleagues ought to get into a room and in a bipartisan way figure out something, come up with solutions. So I would like to ask you today to pretend that this is that room. And you've just been asked, Senator McMahon, what are your ideas? What would you say?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question, and thank you for joining us today. What I have said about Social Security is that I will not support any budget that would reduce the benefits that our seniors are getting today. And I have continued to say that we do need to get in a room and put the issues on the table. There are several things to think about relative to reforming and preserving Social Security and Medicare as we move forward. And all of those issues need to be put on the table. I've not talked about specifics when I've been on the campaign trail because they get demagogued, and you have no opportunity at all when you go in then to put your issues on the table to discuss them. But there are many ways that we can reform Social Security and Medicare, and we must do that. It's not sustainable going forward. But I would not do anything to reduce the benefits that our seniors are getting today. Now, there's only one person on the stage who's already voted to reduce benefits to seniors through Medicare, and that's Congressman Murphy. Congressman Murphy voted to cut Medicare by $716 billion to pay for the Affordable Health Care Act. That is not something that I will do. We need to protect our seniors. We've made promises to them for their Social Security and Medicare, and I will do nothing that will reduce those benefits.
Congressman Murphy.
Nick and Barbara Bonanni are a senior couple living in Meriden, Connecticut. Nick worked at Pratt & Whitney his whole life, and they saved money for retirement, but not enough so that their Social Security check didn't make the difference for them between being able to keep a roof over their head and put food on the table. And Nick and Barbara want to know what their candidates for the United States Senate are going to do when they get elected, and whether or not they are going to ask seniors to bear the burden of saving Social Security, or whether we're going to ask those that have done very well by this economy. Linda McMahon's right. She has refused to tell people what she would do about Social Security when she's been out in public on the campaign trail. But she has told people what she's in favor of doing when she didn't think the cameras were on. When she was speaking before a Tea Party group, she said, and I quote, that I believe in sunset provisions when we pass this kind of legislation so that you can take a look at it 10 or 15 years down the road. I disagree with that. I just don't think we should be playing games with Nick and Barbara's Social Security checks. I think we should fix the problem, but not put our seniors' Social Security paychecks at risk in doing it. And I do think that we have an obligation as candidates for the Senate to tell people what we're going to do. I mean, she says that she's going to get demagogued. Well, that maybe is a different way of saying that she's going to lose votes. Well, you might lose votes if you take a position. But that's our responsibility as candidates, to tell folks what we do. I have said repeatedly that I would support raising the cap on income that is taxable for Social Security purposes, so that we ask those who have done very well in this economy to help us pay for the program. And as for this idea that I've cut $700 billion from Medicare, it's just wrong. We've cut those monies from overpayments to insurance companies and overpayments to drug companies, and use the money to make benefits stronger for seniors. The health care bill cuts in half the amount that a senior has to pay when they go into the donut hole. It's remove preventative health care co-pays. That's what the health care bill was all about.
Thank you. Mrs. McMahon, you've got a minute to respond.
Congressman Murphy, you know that you've not been honest about stating what my position is relative to Social Security. You constantly use part of a quote, and even though you say you've read it in its entirety, you never read the whole thing. The Hartford Courant even said the ad that you've put up relative to this in your own statements are baseless and false. I have repeatedly said that I will not do anything to cut benefits to our seniors who are getting them today, and that I won't. Cutting that $716 billion out of Medicare does affect seniors' benefits, because it reduces the reimbursements to hospitals and doctors and nursing homes. Medicare actuaries have said that 15% of hospitals will go out of business if those payments aren't reimbursed to them. So this is a benefit reduction to our seniors and something to be concerned about.
It's difficult to understand what Linda McMahon really believes about Social Security, because in our fourth straight debate, she won't be straight with the people of this state. And so we have to take the few comments that she's made on the record, like she did to this Tea Party group when she said she would support sunsetting it, as her position, because other than that, you just can't get from her priorities. And on Medicare, her ideas are even more dangerous. She said repeatedly that she would be open to Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney's plan to privatize Medicare. Privatizing Medicare would be an absolute disaster for seniors across this state. Why? Because it would put the entire Medicare system in the hands of insurers who have their profits, not our best interests at heart. And the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that privatization would cost seniors $6,000 more per year. I'm going to fight with every breath in me privatization. I'm not going to go to Washington as a vote for it.
Okay, I need you to take a breath now. Our next question is going to come from Dennis House, and I believe this is going to go to Congressman Murphy.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, Connecticut is a state controlled by a Democratic governor, a Democratic-controlled legislature, and a congressional delegation made up of all Democrats, with the exception of independent Democrat Joe Lieberman. If elected, this one-party rule will continue. Why do you believe complete control by one party is good for Connecticut?
Well, listen, I've watched what the Republican Party has become in Washington. And we've had in this state a tradition of Republicans that were different from what we see in Washington today. Today, unfortunately, the Republican Party has really become radicalized. It has become a shadow of what it once was. And I don't think they have Connecticut's interests at heart. The Republican Party that seeks to take control of the United States Senate would eradicate a woman's right to choose what she could do with her own body. A Republican Senate would destroy the environmental protections that the state and this nation has fought so hard for. A Republican Senate would pass another round of tax cuts for the very wealthy at the expense of the middle class. Republicans that would take over the Senate want to do away with things like the Department of Education, which have funded our schools here in Connecticut. This is the Republican Party that Linda McMahon would empower if she was elected to the United States Senate. And on many of those issues, she holds the same position as they do. I'm proud of the fact that I have reached out across the aisle as a member of Congress, that I've started a group called the Center Aisle Caucus, which is a group of Republicans and Democrats that are working together to try to find areas that the two parties can come together. I'm proud that I've taken on my president when I think that he's wrong, calling for a budget that cuts spending at a greater rate than he was willing to, and saying that he hasn't been strong enough on protecting our manufacturers. I'm certainly willing to call out my party and my president when I think that he's wrong, but what I've watched in Washington is a Republican Party and a Tea Party that does not have Connecticut's interests at heart, one that Linda McMahon would be the 51st vote for if she was elected to the United States Senate.
Mrs. McMahon, it's your turn.
Well, I certainly would like to look at what the history has been over the last 6 years that Congressman Murphy has been in Congress. He's just had failed policies that have increased our debt, almost doubled our debt. Our taxes have gone up, food prices have increased, gas prices have gone up, wages are lower, home foreclosures, all here in our state, are increasing. 170,000 people woke up this morning without a job in Connecticut. The issues of this race are about jobs and the economy. And we need to send, I believe, senators to Washington who have experience creating jobs and know the impact. I've walked in those shoes. I know what it's like to lose everything and to have to come back from bankruptcy and to start all over again. I know what it's like to have a child and not have any health care coverage. And when I talk to the people in Connecticut, these are the issues that are on their mind. They're worried about their jobs. So what we need to do is to make sure that our elected officials that are going to Washington have that kind of experience. Let's create jobs. That's what we need to do, put people back to work. When we put people back to work, we will get our economy back on track. And I have a plan to do that, a 6-point plan that cuts taxes for the middle class, cuts taxes for our businesses, rolls back burdensome regulations, cuts spending 1 penny of every dollar, except for our defense spending. We will have a comprehensive energy plan. We'll drill for our oil, our natural gas, while we continue to develop our wind and solar and geothermal. And we will train and empower a workforce by training them for the jobs that we have available. Congressman Murphy has no plan to put people back to work and to address these issues. The folks in Connecticut want to know, what are we going to do to put them back to work?
Thank you, Mrs. McMahon. Congressman Murphy, you have a minute.
Well, Linda McMahon's just wrong. I do have a plan, and I'm proud of it. I have a plan that's very different from hers, and the reason for that is that we've tried Linda McMahon's plan, and it failed. We tried it under the Bush administration. Less taxes for millionaires, exploding deficits, less funding for our schools and job training program and infrastructure. There's nothing different in Linda McMahon's plan than what has been tried and failed already. And so I want to do something different. I want to concentrate tax cuts on the middle class and take the money that we would be spending on tax cuts for the wealthy and put it into our families, put it into our schools, help our kids who need a little bit of a boost. There's a big difference between our plans in this election, and that's what we should be talking about. I just don't think that we should go back to the same set of failed economic policies that are essentially that vaunted 6-point plan that Linda McMahon talks about that has resulted in the economic catastrophe that we're just emerging from.
Thank you. Back to you, Mrs. McMahon.
You know, Congressman Murphy, every time it's time for you to talk about the issues in your plan, the next 2 words are Linda McMahon. I'd really like to talk about the issues. You say you have a plan. You don't have a plan. I'd like for you to go through your plan. Mine's 6 points. I've put it down. You can look at it. You can judge it. You can see what I stand for. You can see what I'm going to do. My plan is to cut taxes for the middle class, lower that bracket from 25% to 15%. That's the only bracket that I would touch. The rest of the brackets stay in place. And if your plan were to go through, or your policy relative to taxes on the, and allow the upper income to increase, we'd lose about 700,000 jobs. That's not the kind of proposal that we need to get our country back on track.
Okay, time for a new question from Keisha Grant, this time for Mrs. McMahon.
Steve, thank you. Good afternoon, Mrs. McMahon. You've both touched on the fact that the middle class is hurting across the country. Connecticut's certainly no different. We live in one of the wealthiest states, yet we have one of the highest poverty rates. Do you view the income gap as a problem facing our state? And if so, do you have a plan to close the poverty gap and revive the middle class in Connecticut?
Well, that is exactly what my plan is designed to do. It is to put people back to work. And by cutting taxes for the middle class from that 25% to the 15% bracket, and then lowering taxes on jobs, on job creators, so that we give them certainty and they will invest and grow, reducing business taxes from 35 to 25% so that our companies are globally competitive. You know, getting rid of the overburdensome regulations. I've talked about, you know, a lot of these points just previously. But regulations really hurt businesses. We need regulations, but we don't need the overburdensome portion of those regulations. So my plan is designed and geared to jumpstart the economy by putting our people back to work. Taxes on job creators need to be reduced. Small businesses need to have certainty that they can hire. They don't know what's going to happen at the end of this year. Are all the tax rates going to expire? If they all expire, we'll lose 2 million jobs in our country. If the full implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act goes through, this will be tax increases. There are 21 tax increases in the Affordable Health Care Act. They don't know relative to sequestration. So defense industries here in our state are looking at potentially having jobs cut at Electric Boat. It would result in about 35,000 loss of jobs at Electric Boat. These are a lot of issues that are preventing our businesses from growing and hiring. So the middle class will benefit from a tax cut. They'll go back to work. Small businesses will create more jobs, and our economy will get jump-started and get back on track.
Congressman Murphy.
You know, a good part of that answer from Linda McMahon was just a recitation of this idea that if you give tax cuts to millionaires or if you cut regulations for businesses, that you're going to shrink the wage gap. And I think that's a misunderstanding of what actually empowers people in this country. You know, my mother got the chance to rise herself up out of poverty because of education, because we gave individuals at the bottom of our economic scale tools with which to succeed. Linda McMahon wants to solve the problem for people who are at the bottom of the income scale by helping people at the top of the income scale. That's not what has made our country great. What's made our country great is investing in those people. That's why I think that we should end the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, take half of it and pay down our deficit, and put the other half into education. That's why I don't think that Linda McMahon needs another $7 million tax cut. I think that we should be putting that money into our people, whether it be job training programs or whether it be lowering class sizes. Ultimately, investments in people, believing that they can do something great, is what is going to close that gap. But Linda McMahon's had the chance to do this in the past, and she hasn't. She hasn't done it. When the state of Connecticut gave her $10 million, her company, to create jobs in the middle of the recession, she took that money, she pocketed it, and at the same time laid off 10% of her workforce while making $46 million. That's what exacerbates the wage gap, is CEOs who take advantage of state tax credits and who take advantage of their workers to make tens of millions of dollars while everybody else suffers. I have a very different record. I've supported education, job training, the kind of programs that grow the middle class from the ground up, not from the top down.
When we go to this one-minute response, you both mentioned the middle class a lot in this campaign and in the debates. I wonder, as part of your response, if you could define what the middle class means to you. How do you define middle class?
But to me,
Yes.
well, as part of my plan, when I am reducing this 25% to 15% on the tax scale, that is the spread of $83,000 to $146,000. So I am looking at that portion and referencing them as the middle class as part of my plan. But Congressman Murphy, again, mischaracterizes my plan. My plan is not about a tax cut for me. My plan is about a tax cut for the middle class. That is the only tax cut that's part of my plan. The other brackets stay the same. And if we're going to jumpstart our economy, let's reinvigorate our middle class. Let's get our small businesses working. I've been there. I know what it takes. I know that kind of impetus and how you grow when you have certainty to invest. Congressman Murphy has never created any jobs. He's not been part of the private market. He's a career politician, and we don't need to send the same people to Washington who made this mess now and expect them to fix it.
Thank you. Congressman Murphy, 1 minute.
Sure. Well, listen, I think being part of the middle class is a mentality. I think a family that's struggling to be able to make their budget work every month, who would be in dire straits if they missed a couple paychecks, that's the middle class. But Mrs. McMahon is wrong with the idea that just experience in the private sector automatically qualifies you to be a United States Senator, qualifies you to know something about creating jobs. I think when you've made the choices that she's made to pocket our money as state taxpayers and then lay off workers, that shows that you don't necessarily have the values that it takes to be a United States Senator. Ultimately, Linda McMahon's plan could drastically cut funding for education. I think we should go the other way. I think that we should be making investments in our schools and in our colleges to allow more little girls like my mother to be able to live the American dream. That's what creates real wealth, and to the original question, that's what helps to start to shrink that wage gap.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mark Davis, and it goes to Congressman Murphy.
Before we started this debate, the panelists did not agree to any questions in advance, but the one thing we did agree to with the moderator was to try to cover new territory. But unfortunately, as hard as my colleagues have tried, I've heard the same stuff here for the previous 20 minutes. So let's try something else. Most of the people that I hear from are fed up with your advertising. And what they don't seem to realize is that the radio and television broadcasting stations have no power to veto or edit your advertisements in any way under federal law, which gives you the opportunity to legally lie on radio and television. Would you support repeal of that law?
Well, listen, I think that it would be of great benefit to the people of the state of Connecticut to be able to hear the truth. And it seems like almost every other week we're picking up the Hartford Current and they are rating another Linda McMahon ad as significantly misleading. Now, I'll say this. I think that we do have the obligation as candidates to talk about the differences between us in this race. I'm proud to be running an ad on TV right now that's talking about my jobs record, about the work that I've done to create jobs in Meriden, Connecticut, with the building of a new commuter rail line, about the fact that I've been able to bring money to rehab an old factory in Waterbury, to put teachers back on the job in New Britain, to build new submarines in Groton. But I also understand that I've got to talk about where Linda McMahon and I are different. And I think advertising is an appropriate place to do that. People need to know, Mark, that I support tax cuts for the middle class and Linda McMahon supports tax cuts for the wealthy. People need to know that I support a woman's right to choose and that they have access to contraception, and Linda McMahon sides with the right wing in her support of legislation to allow employers to end contraception for women in the workplace. And so I do think that we need to tell this story. But ultimately, something else besides the amount of money that you have to run ads has to matter in this campaign. I mean, obviously, I've been outspent on TV by a 5-to-1 margin by Linda McMahon. And in the end, I think that it's not those TV commercials that's going to win out. I think that it's our ideas, and I think it's the difference in the values that we hold that people are going to see. So, listen, I'm proud to talk about my record on TV, but I also think that we have an obligation to talk about our differences.
So you don't support repealing the law that requires the broadcasters to carry your ads no matter what they say?
Well, I think it'd be a little dangerous to have individuals deciding which ads to run and which to not, but I'd certainly be willing to look at a way to allow stations to have a little bit more discretion.
Thank you, Chris. Mrs. McMahon.
There have been instances where ads have been taken down when they contained false information. That has happened.
Voluntarily?
If they're asked to do that, yes, and it's proven to be false. There are instances of that. You know, but Congressman Murphy talks about how the Hartford Current, he brings up the Hartford Current talking about my ads. The Hartford Current clearly said, relative to his ad, relative to my Social Security stance, that it was baseless and false. And so we can look and know that Congressman Murphy, you know, has to own up to his own actions. You know, the way I believe that we communicate best with our voters here in Connecticut is to be out talking with them, interacting with them, letting them look us in the eye, letting them ask us the tough questions, because believe me, I've been all over our state, and our folks here in Connecticut are not shy about asking you what you're going to do and what are you going to do for me? That's what they say to me. A woman who comes up to me and says, with tears in her eyes, I lost my job. I'm now working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet, and I can't do it. A mother who looks at me and says, you know what? Gas prices are so high that I'm now having to choose between which activities I take my kids to. These are the results of the failed policies of Congressman Murphy over the past 6 years that he served in Congress. He's voted to raise the debt ceiling 6 times. Our debt is more than doubled. He's voted to increase taxes. He says he'll cut taxes on the middle class, but he's raised taxes on the middle class, voted to raise taxes on the middle class. So if we look at Congressman Murphy's record, he does one thing, says one thing here in Connecticut, and does another thing when he gets to Washington. And that's what we have to change. We have to have job creators who are going to deliver for the people of Connecticut, and people who know how to create jobs.
Thank
You also don't support repeal, then, in other words,
No,
of the law requiring broadcasters to carry the spots no matter what they say.
no, I don't
All right,
vote
so
for
you agree
I
on
would
that,
not
then.
vote to repeal
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. Congressman Murphy.
Sure. Well, let's clarify one thing. The ad that Linda McMahon is talking about is not my ad. But she is right about the fact that it's important for us to get out there and talk to people. And frankly, Linda McMahon has been very reluctant to do this. Very reluctant to go out and talk to reporters, meet with editorial boards. And you can see why. Because when she does, we start to see what she really stands for. We start to hear about these plans to sunset Social Security or to potentially support the privatization of Medicare. You start to see, as she said at the Hartford Current editorial board meeting last week, that she would oppose Connecticut's law mandating emergency contraception for rape victims. You know, I think that people deserve to hear about the real plans that Linda McMahon or I will have for this state. I want to do something different than we've done in the past. I want to make sure that we invest in the middle class rather than in the rich, and I'm willing to talk about that in any forum. I think that that should be how voters make up their mind.
Mrs. McMahon.
Well, Congressman Murphy, I'm waiting for you to talk about your plan of how you're going to help the middle class and how you're going to put people back to work. You clearly do not come forth with any kind of a plan. You continue to talk about your record. You said your record is your plan. You don't have to talk about a plan because you have a record.
I've been talking about my plan all day today.
Your record, it's not your turn. Your record has been to raise taxes on the middle class. Your record has been to increase our debt almost double. Your record has been, the effect of your record has been increased gas prices, higher unemployment, food costs going up, wages going down, and more home foreclosures here in our state. We can't afford 6 more years of a Senator Murphy in Washington.
All right, we're back to the beginning of the reporter panel. Al Terzi, you get the next question, and it's going to go first to Mrs. McMahon.
Mrs. McMahon, Mr. Murphy has suggested that if the Republicans gain the majority in the Senate, women better look out. You have portrayed yourself as being pro-choice, but the National Abortion Rights Action League has endorsed Mr. Murphy. At the same time, many abortion opponents, including a top leader of Connecticut's Right to Life organization, are saying they will vote for you. So I think voters are probably confused about all this. How would you demonstrate and prove to doubtful voters that you truly are pro-choice?
I have said from the beginning when I got into the campaign the first time that I am a pro-choice candidate. That has not wavered. Look, I'm a woman. I have a daughter. I have 3 granddaughters. I don't want to take any action that is going to be harmful for them relative to their health choices or relative to choices I think that they should make and not the federal government. Congressman Murphy has talked about where I am on this issue. I am pro-choice, and I've not wavered from that position. I think it's very important that we have health care in place for contraceptives, for mammograms, for those things, and I've provided those at my company. I'm proud of the record that I have. And again, I will do nothing that is going to negatively impact the health and well-being of those closest to me, especially my daughter and my granddaughters. To think that I would do anything differently is just ludicrous. And I respect and support Connecticut's law for emergency contraception. And the states have a right to have those laws, and I support Connecticut's law.
Well, listen, let's listen to what people who are spending their whole lives on this issue say. Nancy Keenan, the head of the leading pro-choice group in the country, came to Connecticut to campaign for me, and she said Linda McMahon is not pro-choice. Peter Wolfgang, the head of the leading anti-choice organization here in Connecticut, said that he's voting for Linda McMahon because her election could lead to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And you can't say that you're pro-choice while then supporting things like the Blunt Amendment, which would take away from women the ability to purchase contraception. You can't say that you're pro-choice, but then be open to voting for Supreme Court justices that would overturn the very law that provides access for women to full preventative health care benefits. I'm proud to have played a leading role as a pro-choice advocate and a pro-women's health care advocate in this state. I went to the state legislature to fight for Connecticut's law mandating contraception coverage. I stood up as a member of the committee that wrote the health care bill to enact a provision that would establish offices of women's health care in each of the most important health care agencies in the federal government. And for me and my wife, our commitment isn't just a political one, it's personal. My wife was the head of Connecticut's leading pro-choice organization, and we've spent much of our lives fighting for this cause. The facts are clear. Linda McMahon is not pro-choice. She continues to support laws that would undermine access to preventative health care for women. And by going to the United States Senate and perhaps being the 51st vote for an anti-women Tea Party majority there, she could do grave damage to the rights that Connecticut women have accepted and have enjoyed for a very long time.
Congressman Murphy, you talked how hard you fought. When you were at the state Senate, the bill that is now law was in your committee. And when you were co-chair of that committee, you let it die. I'm talking about the emergency contraception law that's on the books now. You were running for Congress at the time, and you would not bring it up for a vote. Other members of the committee had said you had ample opportunity. So you say you work for that, but when you were running for Congress, you let that bill die. I am a pro-choice candidate, and I think what hurts women more in our state today is the fact that they don't have jobs. More women are in poverty, and we need to make sure we can get them back to work. Those are the issues that the women around our state are talking to me about most of all. They want to make sure that they can continue to provide for their family. They make most of the economic decisions in their home, and they're really hurting. They want changes. They want jobs. They want our economy to get back on track. They want to make sure that their husbands are going to be able to have a job, or they're going to be able to have a job, that their kids can have jobs when they graduate from college.
Mr. Murphy, one more minute for you.
Well, listen, Linda McMahon's not telling the truth when she says that I let the bill die. In fact, that's what a Republican supporter of hers says, and every advocate that was pushing for the bill says the opposite, that I was one of the prime supporters of it. And the irony of Linda McMahon attacking me on emergency contraception for rape victims is that she opposes it. She opposes making sure that every woman in this state, whether they walk into a secular or religious hospital, has access to emergency contraception. But I think part of the reason why there is so much support for me amongst women in the state is not just the positions that we've taken on the issues, but it's Linda McMahon's treatment of women in the business that she ran. The way that she demeaned women in the ring is abhorrent to thousands of women across this state, and they take that conduct together with the fact that she would support these very damaging laws if she went to Washington, and it's the reason why Linda McMahon is having a hard time winning support from women across the state.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Dennis House, you have the next question. It goes to Congressman Murphy.
Steve, thank you. And on a related subject, Mr. Murphy, you both have argued at length that you are pro-choice. But when do you believe life begins?
Well, listen, I believe that a woman and a doctor should have the ability to make choices over that woman's body. And I just don't think government should get in the way of that decision. I know different people have different beliefs on that subject, but ultimately that decision about whether a woman goes through the painful choice is ultimately hers and her doctor's to decide. And that is at risk today, right now, Dennis. The Republican Tea Party majority in the House is trying to take that choice away from women, and we are one vote away on the Supreme Court from that decision being removed from women and their families and their physicians, and ultimately being put in the hands of doctors, in the hands of politicians. I just don't think ultimately that's the way to go, and I am going to fight with every last breath to make sure that the women of this state have the ability to make that decision on their own, and I'm going to fight to make sure that the Supreme Court doesn't have enough votes on it to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's a commitment of mine, and frankly, it's very different than the commitments that Linda McMahon has made in this race. So ultimately, listen, I think life begins at birth. I support our current law that restricts late-term abortions unless there is the health or the life of the mother at stake.
Mrs. McMahon.
This is an area on which Congressman Murphy and I have a great deal of agreement. I absolutely am pro-choice. I do not think that that decision needs to be made by the United States government. I believe that women, their families, their doctors, where appropriate, where in the situation that women may find themselves in, should make that choice. It clearly is not to be made by the government. I am absolutely opposed to partial birth abortions with the same caveats Congressman Murphy has, unless it's the health and well-being of the mother. So we are in much agreement on this. I will not support my party in repealing any of these laws because I am a pro-choice candidate. I'm an independent thinker, and I will not always vote strictly down party lines. Congressman Murphy has voted 98% of the time with his party when he has served. But I'm an independent thinker, and I will vote differently than my party if I believe something different than what the party's putting forward.
But when do you believe life begins?
Well, I believe that life begins also at birth, and I don't support partial birth abortions.
Congressman Murphy, you have a minute.
Well, I continue to hear Linda McMahon talk about how she's independent from her party, but when you look at these issues that are so critical to women in this state, it's hard to see the differentiation. She won't draw the line at opposing a Supreme Court justice that opposes Roe versus Wade. She'll support Mitch McConnell to be her party's leader, who will stop at nothing to destroy a woman's right to choose. She supports the Blunt Amendment to end contraception coverage for millions of Americans. She opposes Connecticut's law protecting rape victims with emergency contraception. And so the reason why all of these pro-choice organizations are here so strongly supporting my campaign and opposing Linda McMahon's campaign is that they don't believe that she is pro-choice when she takes these positions. And they've seen my record of standing up for women across this state, and they know that if you care about protecting a woman's right to choose, there's only one choice in this campaign.
Mrs. McMahon.
Congressman Murphy continues to mischaracterize what I've said. I have said that I support Connecticut's law for emergency contraception. There's no deviation from that. I support the law. And as I've said a little bit earlier, these are important issues, but boy, the issues that are facing our women here in our state today is the fact that more of them have lost their jobs, more of them are in poverty, more of them are looking for a way to make sure that they can sustain their families, and they're worried. They want to make sure that our economy is going to get back on track. The thing that is going to give them the greatest comfort is to know that our economy is going to be sound again, that they're going to have jobs, that their wages are going to go up, that they're going to be able to provide for their families. This is the primary issue facing our women today in our state and all of our people in our state as well as our country. We need those to go to Washington who know how to create jobs, get our economy back on track.
Our next question is going to come from Keisha Grant for Mrs. McMahon.
Steve, thank you. Mrs. McMahon, I want to get back to the issue of campaign ads. We've all seen them. You can't miss them. But this particular race has become vicious. It has become personal. When you look at your campaign ads, are you ever embarrassed of them?
I think that we have a great cross-section of our ads on television which put forth my positions and also contrast with Congressman Murphy's positions. I think when there are issues where he has not been forthcoming, we should draw that attention for the people of Connecticut. He had an ad that's running that talks about saving jobs in Groton, supporting jobs at Electric Boat. And this ad was, he had a picture of a Norwegian submarine and not an American submarine. And you know, those kind of ads just need to be corrected. They were also, you know, that's, it's just, I think for the people in Groton, it was very hurtful. And so I think we do need to have honesty in our ads that we put on television. The purpose of the ads is to create, I believe, or to inform the public about what our positions are. I've had ads up that have talked about my plan, that have gone through the 6 steps, that talk about how we're going to put our people back to work. And I'm going to continue to talk about my plan because that's what's on the minds of the people of Connecticut. It is the primary issue in this race all across the country. So I talk about parts of my plan. I will contrast the fact that I want to lower taxes on the middle class with Congressman Murphy, who's voted to raise them. So we will have contrast with the ads that go up on television, and I'm going to continue to communicate my positions with the people of Connecticcut.
So you're
Congressman
saying
Murphy,
you're
it's,
not
go right ahead.
embarrassed?
Go right
I'm
ahead.
sorry. So you're saying that you're not embarrassed of any of those ads that have aired?
No,
Or in
I think
print.
we're communicating our messages to the folks in Connecticut.
All right, I was just going to remind Congressman Murphy when he responds that the question was, are you embarrassed by your own ads?
Thanks, Steve.
I thought I was going to get off easy there. So, listen, I'm proud of the ads that we've run, and I think the fact that Linda McMahon's campaign is reduced to arguing over B-roll footage in our campaign ads shows you how little she really wants to talk about the issues. You know, Linda McMahon's ads have been vicious, and they have been personal, directed at me and my wife and my family. And I think this race should be about the issues. When I run ads, I'm talking about the differences between Linda McMahon and I on our professional backgrounds and on our ideas for this state going forward. I'm not running ads attacking her and her family personally in the way that her ads have attacked me and my family. Her campaign was asked at one point, after they had run about a month or so of straight, vicious, hard-hitting negative ads, why don't you talk about the issues more, Linda McMahon? And her campaign said, well, that would be a senseless exercise. Well, it would be a senseless exercise for Linda McMahon's campaign. We ultimately need to be talking about the differences between the two of us on the issues. But Linda
We'll get another chance there, but we need to,
I think that might have been only 1 minute, but
well, we think. All right, we do hear that you are correct in this one. You get a few more seconds. Sorry.
I don't want to mimic Mitt Romney
Sorry.
in complaining about the debate rules.
You'll both get equal time.
No, I mean, my point is just this, is that, Mrs. McMahon's campaign really doesn't want to talk about the issue differences because, as we've heard, on issues of women's health care or issues of tax policy or supporting education, we do have major differences between our two campaigns. And ultimately, I hope that the last 2 weeks of this campaign are on those differences, because if we're talking about our visions for the state and our plans, then I think people are going to see that Linda McMahon stands with a right-wing ideology in Washington that's not right for this state. Well, I've been rooted in what's best for our economy.
We replaced the batteries in our clock. We're back on time. Mrs. McMahon, you have a minute.
Well, I just keep asking Congressman Murphy to talk about the issues. Then you hear Linda McMahon. But the issues in this race, I will keep coming back to over and over again, and you don't hear him talking about these. You don't hear him talking about what his plan is going to be to put the people in our state back to work. You don't hear him talking about how he is going to grow the economy. He says he doesn't need to talk about his plan because he can stand on his record. And I've pointed out earlier in this debate, his record. We do not have a solid economy. We have higher taxes, higher prices, debt that's doubled since he's been in office, and we cannot afford 6 more years of these failed policies.
Congressman?
Well, that's not true. We don't have higher taxes today. We have lower taxes. Over the last 4 years, we've lowered middle-class taxes for people in this state. And I do talk about my plan. No matter how many times Lyndon McMahon repeats it, it just doesn't make it true. Repetition doesn't equal veracity. The fact is that my plan is rooted in a middle-class tax cut, an end to the Bush tax cuts. My plan is rooted in new energy security for this nation so we can lead the world in renewable energy jobs. My plan is rooted in rebuilding this nation to put construction workers back on the job. My plan is rooted in taking half of those Bush tax cuts and putting them into education so that we can educate the next generation of business creators and job creators across this country. My plan is rooted in investing in the people of this state. And no matter how many times Linda McMahon wants to say that I don't have one, does not make it true. Let's talk about the differences between our plans. Let's talk about the issues that matter to the people of Connecticut rather than engaging in this unnecessary hyperbole.
Thank you. Mark Davis, a question from you to Congressman Murphy.
Well, this is really to both of you. Given the nasty nature of the advertising and the debates and the campaign press releases, this is a very appropriate question. It's not mine. came from a colleague of mine at ABC News. Let's see how you do. Would you please say something nice about your opponent?
I'm not sure we'll need a full 2 minutes on this, but Congressman
You may not
Murphy,
need to.
you get to go first.
No, I absolutely will. You know, Linda McMahon is clearly a very driven person. She's someone, when she sets her mind to something, has shown that she can accomplish that. I'd also, you know, note that she has, over the last several years, made some substantial investments in some Connecticut charities. I know that that has done some good things for people, and I certainly give her credit on both of those accounts. You know, you're right. That these campaigns do tend to get very personal, and I think people are sick and tired of it. I think people want these campaigns to be about the issue differences. And I think they're sick and tired of these campaigns being so personal because they then see it get extended over into governing. That they then watch Washington do nothing but fight while they, in their lives, are finding a way to get along. You know, when times get tough, families find a way to get beyond their differences. Co-workers find a way to agree. And they don't see that in Washington today. That's why I've spent so much time on this issue of bipartisan cooperation. You know, this group, the Center Aisle Caucus, I don't claim that it's changing the partisan culture by itself in Washington, but I decided to stop complaining about the personal politics, and I decided to try to do something about it. So I took over a group of Republicans and Democrats that gets together to try to talk about civility. We were the group, for instance, behind the two parties sitting next to each other during the State of the Union speech. I get it. It's not revolutionary, but it's time that we elected some people to Washington who were going to start working on bringing the two parties together down there. I'm proud of that work that I've done in the House of Representatives. I want to do more of it in the Senate, and I'm happy to admit that for all of our disagreements, there are certainly nice things that I can say.
Mrs. McMahon.
Well, I think one of the nicest things that I've seen about Congressman Murphy are his two little boys. They are so cute. And being a grandmother with 6 little grandchildren, and I look at them and I imagine the kind of pride that he has in watching them every day and wanting to have the best, you know, for them. And so that's something I've noticed with Congressman Murphy and his little boys, and I congratulate him and his wife on having such a nice family. I'm sure that he would also like to make sure that the future for those little boys is going to be bright and that they're going to have the opportunities, even better opportunities, that he's had or his parents before him and the next generation to come till we follow this whole gamut. And so that's why I am focusing so much in this race on what is wrong with our economy today. And I will keep going back to it because it is what is pulling down our middle class. That's why I want a tax cut for the middle class. I want to make sure that his little boys, my grandchildren, have the same kind of opportunities in America to succeed. That's what got me into this race to start with. I looked at the faces of my little grandchildren, and I wondered if they were going to have the same opportunities that their grandfather and I had. When our debt was going out of control, when our deficit was increasing, when we were spending more than we were making, when jobs were falling by the wayside. And I looked at them and thought, I don't want that to be my legacy to them. I want my legacy to them to be that they have America's promise for opportunity, that they can try to be what they want to be, that they can take risks, and if they fail, they have an opportunity to get back. Their grandfather and I failed. At one point, we lost everything we had. We had to declare bankruptcy. We lost our car. We had to start over. But we were able to because of the opportunities that this country offered us. That is my mission and goal, is to make sure they have that same opportunity.
Congressman Murphy, you have another minute to say nice things.
Well, for the record, I think Linda McMahon said nice things about my little boys. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Mrs. McMahon. We're really proud of them. And I don't take a lot of credit for how wonderful they are. I give most of it to my wife. And listen, I think, you know, my reason for running is rooted in those same stories. You know, I do often talk about my mother in this race and her ascent into the middle class from poverty. And I think, you know, to say it in as dispassionate a way as possible, there's just a difference in terms of how Linda McMahon and I approach that solution to economic mobility. I just don't believe that you invest in those kids who want to become great by giving tax cuts to the wealthy. I think that you support education and job training. I think you support things like public housing and the programs that can make their families whole. I think maybe some of our rationales for running are similar. I just think we come out in very different places on how we effectuate that change.
Right. Mrs. McMahon, you have another minute to say warm and fuzzy things about Congressman Murphy, if you choose.
Don't push it too far. Congressman Murphy and I do have a different philosophy. His philosophy is one of bigger government and more government control. Mine is one of private sector investing. He continues to talk about my plan as a tax cut for the rich. It is not. It is a tax cut for the middle class. It is a tax, it is keeping the other brackets the same. I won't be affected. We will have money to invest in our education and all the other things in our country if we get our debt in line and get our economy back on track. That doesn't happen by magic. It doesn't happen by the regulations that are passed in Washington. It happens by encouraging our middle class and letting our job creators and our small businesses flourish. Our economy will then grow. We can then invest in all of the things that he's talking about. But as long as we stay so mired in debt, we are not going to come out of this recession that we've been in. We're just going to continue to plod along. We need change.
Okay, thank you. We are getting close to the end of the hour, so here's where we're going to switch things up just a little bit. I tell you both up front, I'm going to ask you a question. You're each going to get 1 minute to answer the question and then 1 minute rebuttal. I want to ask you a foreign policy question. Governor, and this is going to go to you first, Mr. McMahon. Governor Malloy went to China recently to try to drum up business for the state of Connecticut, but there are a lot of other people who complain about China's influence in the world, both geopolitical and economic. I wonder, do you view China as an ally or a rival to the United States?
Well, I can tell you relative to Governor Malloy, well, this is not really relative to Governor Malloy, but it's relative to China and businesses here in our state. China is our fifth export in Connecticut, so there is a lot of business that happens between Connecticut and China. I do think that the Chinese need to respect our intellectual property laws, which they do not. They take our products, they manufacture an inferior version, and sell it for cheaper prices. I think that the World Trade Organization needs to be more involved so that we are not allowing China to manipulate its currency. It is an increasing economic and global power, one that we must watch, but one that we cannot be afraid of.
Congressman, ally or rival?
Well, they're both. And the fact is that we have let China get away with murder when it comes to trade policy. The way they manipulate their currency often means that a product that the Connecticut company produces is more expensive before they even begin to manufacture it. Because of how that currency is manipulated, we should call them out for that, and we should, frankly, engage in sanctions to make them stop. The Buy America work that I've done is critical to this as well. The federal government, with our own taxpayer dollars, are outsourcing our own work in the Department of Defense to Chinese companies. We should stop that and keep our work here at home. And listen, I do think our histories are relevant here. I've fought outsourcing. Linda McMahon has outsourced her own work at WWE to countries like China. On the issue of whether or not we're going to stand up to that kind of outsourcing, I do think there are big differences in this campaign.
Mrs. McMahon, you have a minute to answer that.
Well, Congressman Murphy talks about his Buy American plan, and yet, if it was such a good idea, he didn't vote for it. He voted against it more than twice when he was in Congress. So he talks about Buy American. I have been all around our state. I've talked to companies who are threatened with the knockoffs, if you will, that China does. But also what's happening is they're finding that they are now repairing those products, and often companies who were sourcing those products are coming directly back to the U.S. company because China's product's inferior. We do need to have a tough stance. We do need to make sure they're not manipulating their currency. We need to make sure they're respecting our intellectual property, and we should view them as a trading partner, but we do need to have fair trade.
Congressman, you have a minute also.
Sure. Well, you know, Linda McMahon likes this line that I voted against my Buy America measure. I fought hard for that amendment. I voted for the amendment. The fact is that she attacks me on this issue because she doesn't want to tell you that she doesn't believe in the Buy America movement. She doesn't believe that we should advantage Connecticut companies and American companies with taxpayer contracts. There are companies right here in Connecticut, companies like Colonial Bronze or Ansonia Copper and Brass, who are losing jobs as we speak because we don't have people in Congress who are standing up for Buy America laws. Linda McMahon said that it's a slogan, not a strategy. That's not true. There's 600,000 jobs in this country that could be created if we had stronger Buy America laws. For those workers who are desperate for a paycheck, that's not a slogan, that's a solution.
Okay, very good. We had a separate coin toss earlier this afternoon on the issue of closing statements in order, and the result of that coin toss was that the first closing statement is going to come from Linda McMahon.
Thank you very much again for joining us today. You, the voters of Connecticut, will have a clear choice in November, a clear choice between someone who's created jobs and has a plan to do that for you, and someone who's never created a job and has no plan for those people who are out of work in our state, which is the most important issue in this election. A plan, you'll have a choice between someone who can't be bought and between someone who's already taken special interest money for a loan. My opponent's chief ambition is to hold public office. Mine is to make sure that our kids and grandkids have a better opportunity than we did. So I'm asking you to make history in November, not send another career politician to Washington, but send the first woman from Connecticut to serve in the United States Senate, a woman who can't be bought, a woman who will work only for you. I'm Linda McMahon, and I'm asking for your vote on November 6th.
Congressman Murphy, your closing statement.
Well, you know, my parents taught me a simple lesson in life. They said that if there's a fight that matters to your family, to your community, that you can't sit on the sidelines. That's why I've dedicated my entire life to fighting for the middle class of this state, whether it was passing stem cell research, fighting for middle class tax cuts, or standing up for manufacturing jobs. I've been in the middle of some of the biggest fights that have mattered to this state. And what makes the contrast between me and Linda McMahon so clear is that Linda McMahon hasn't just sat on the sidelines. She's made things worse by mistreating her workers, by outsourcing work, and by selling sex and violence to our kids. Linda McMahon's never been there for us, but I have. I hope I've lived up to that challenge that my mother laid out for me, that my father laid out for me. And it'd be the honor of my life to get to continue that work as your United States Senator.
Thank you. We hope that this debate has helped voters as they ponder their final decision in this election. And we also urge you to vote on Election Day. I want to thank our candidates, Chris Murphy and Linda McMahon, and our reporter panel, Al Terzi, Dennis House, Keisha Grant, and Mark Davis. Also the Hilton Hotel in Hartford, and of course our sponsor, the Connecticut Broadcasters Association. I'm Steve Konsko. Thanks for being with us.